The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 in the morning, just like it did every single day. 24-year-old Rosa dragged herself out of bed, her body aching from yesterday's double shift at the diner. She quickly got dressed in the dark, trying not to wake her two younger brothers who shared the tiny bedroom next door. Their small apartment was cramped, but it was home. More importantly, it was all they could afford. Rosa tiptoed into the kitchen and made herself a cup of instant coffee. Through the thin walls, she could hear her mother coughing in the next room. That cough had been getting worse for months now, but they couldn't afford to see a specialist. The free clinic doctors just kept saying it was probably nothing serious, but Rosa knew better. She could see her mother getting weaker every day. By 5 in the morning, Rosa was already at her first job, cleaning offices in the business district downtown. She mopped floors, emptied trash cans, and wiped down desks while the city was still sleeping. The work was hard and lonely, but it paid the bills. Well, some of them anyway. There were always more bills than money, no matter how hard she worked. Her father had died 3 years ago in a construction accident. One moment he was there, working hard to provide for his family, and the next moment everything changed forever. The company he worked for barely gave them anything. They said it was his own fault, that he hadn't followed safety procedures. Rosa knew that was a lie, but they couldn't afford a lawyer to fight back. Poor people rarely win against big companies. After her father died, Rosa had to drop out of college. She was in her second year studying to become a teacher. She loved learning, loved the idea of helping children discover the world. But real life got in the way of dreams. Her mother couldn't work anymore because of her health problems, and her brothers were still in high school. Someone had to step up and take care of the family. That someone was Rosa. By 8 in the morning, she was rushing to her second job at a small cafe near the university. She served coffee and sandwiches to students who were living the life she used to have. They complained about their exams and their professors while Rosa smiled and nodded, pretending their problems mattered as much as wondering how to pay for next month's rent. She tried not to be bitter. These kids hadn't done anything wrong. They were just lucky to be born into different circumstances. During her lunch break, Rosa usually called home to check on her mother and make sure her brothers had gone to school. Today was no different. Her younger brother Miguel answered the phone, his voice tight with worry. "Rosa, Mom's cough is really bad today. She can barely get out of bed." Rosa's heart sank. "Did you give her the medicine from the clinic?" "Yeah, but it's not helping much. She needs to see a real doctor, Rosa, a specialist or something." I know. Just make sure she rests, okay? I'll figure something out." But Rosa had no idea how she would figure anything out. They were already behind on rent. The electricity bill was overdue, and now her mother needed medical care they couldn't afford. Rosa felt like she was drowning, and every time she came up for air, another wave crashed over her head. That evening, Rosa put on her nicest dress for her third job. Well, it wasn't really that nice. She'd bought it at a thrift store for $5, but she'd carefully mended a tear in the sleeve, and it looked decent enough. 3 nights a week, she worked as a server at fancy charity events across the city. Rich people gathered to raise money for various causes while eating expensive food and drinking champagne. The irony wasn't lost on Rosa. These people spent more on one dinner than her family spent on food for an entire month. Tonight's event was at a gorgeous hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the tables were decorated with fresh flowers that probably cost more than Rosa's monthly salary. She moved through the crowd with a tray of appetizers invisible to most of the guests. Rich people had a way of looking right through servers, as if they were furniture instead of human beings. Rosa was clearing plates from a table when she heard a loud crash behind her. An elderly woman had tripped and fallen, her purse and belongings scattered across the marble floor. Without thinking, Rosa rushed over to help. She knelt beside the woman, gently helping her sit up. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Did you hurt yourself?" The woman looked shaken but managed a weak smile. "I think I'm okay, dear. Just feeling a bit foolish. These heels are too high for someone my age." Rosa helped gather the woman's belongings while other guests simply stepped around them, more concerned with their conversations than with someone who had fallen. It made Rosa angry, but she kept her face neutral and professional. She couldn't afford to lose this job. "Let me help you to a chair," Rosa said softly, supporting the woman's elbow as she slowly got to her feet. An older gentleman rushed over, his face full of concern. "Margaret, are you hurt? Should I call for medical help?" No, Richard. I'm fine, thanks to this lovely young lady." The man named Richard turned to Rosa, really looking at her. Most wealthy people at these events never truly saw her, but this man's eyes were different, kind, thoughtful. "Thank you for helping my friend. That was very kind of you." Rosa just nodded and excused herself. She had work to do, and standing around chatting with guests wasn't part of her job description. But for the rest of the evening, she occasionally caught the older man watching her with a curious expression on his face. Over the next few weeks, something strange started happening. The man from the charity event, Richard, began showing up at the cafe where Rosa worked her morning shift. He would sit in the corner, reading his newspaper and drinking coffee. At first, Rosa thought it was just a coincidence. The cafe was popular with business people from the nearby offices, but he kept coming back, always sitting in her section, always leaving a generous tip. One morning, he struck up a conversation. His voice was gentle, grandfatherly. "You work very hard, don't you?" Rosa was wiping down his table, caught off guard by the personal question. "I do what I need to do, sir. I've seen you at the charity events, too. That's a lot of jobs for someone so young." She felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I have a family to take care of." Over the following weeks, Richard became a regular presence. He wasn't creepy or inappropriate. He just talked to her like she was a person, not just a server. He asked about her day, her interests, her family. Rosa found herself opening up bit by bit, telling him about her brothers, her sick mother, her father's death. There was something safe about talking to this stranger, maybe because he seemed genuinely interested, or maybe because she was so tired of carrying everything alone. Then one day, Richard didn't order his usual coffee. Instead, he looked at Rosa with serious eyes and said something that would change her life forever. "I have a proposition for you. Please hear me out before you say no." Rosa's hands trembled slightly as she held her notepad. She had no idea that this conversation would lead to a decision that would shock everyone, including herself. A decision that would take her from this small cafe to a life she never could have imagined, and to a discovery that would leave her breathless exactly 1 week later. Rosa stared at Richard, her heart pounding in her chest. A proposition? What could a wealthy older man possibly want to propose to someone like her? 100 thoughts raced through her mind, most of them making her want to run away as fast as she could. Richard must have seen the fear in her eyes because he quickly raised his hand. "Please, it's nothing inappropriate. I promise you that. Can we sit down and talk? Just 5 minutes of your time?" Rosa glanced at her manager, who nodded. It was a slow morning anyway. She sat down across from Richard, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was ready to bolt at any second. "I'm 73 years old," Richard began, his voice steady and calm. "I'm a widower. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and I've been alone ever since. I have no children, no close family left. Just a big empty house and more money than I could ever spend." He paused, looking directly into Rosa's eyes. "I've been watching you these past weeks, and I see someone who works harder than anyone I've ever met. Someone who's drowning but refuses to give up." Rosa felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't want pity from anyone. Richard continued. "I want to make you an offer, marry me. Not for love or romance, but as a business arrangement. I'll pay off all your family's debts. I'll get your mother the best medical care available. I'll make sure your brothers finish school and go to college if they want. All I ask in return is companionship. Someone to share meals with, to talk to make that big empty house feel less lonely in my final years." Rosa couldn't believe what she was hearing. It sounded insane, like something out of a movie, not real life. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I've had my lawyer draw up papers. Everything would be legal and proper. You'd have your own room, your own space. No expectations beyond friendship and company. And if you ever want to leave, the support for your family continues regardless. Think about it. No pressure." He stood up, left a business card on the table, and walked out of the cafe. Rosa sat there for 10 minutes, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket for the rest of her shift. That night, Rosa sat at her mother's bedside. The coughing had gotten worse. Her mother could barely eat anymore, and her skin had taken on a grayish color that terrified Rosa. Her brothers were asleep in the next room, and Rosa found herself crying silently, holding her mother's thin hand. "What's wrong, mija?" her mother whispered weakly. Rosa told her everything, about Richard, About his offer, about how crazy and impossible it all sounded. Her mother listened quietly, her eyes growing sad. "That's a terrible choice to have to make," her mother said. "To give up your youth, your chance at real love, for money. I don't want that for you. But Mama, you need help. The boys need help. I can't do this alone anymore." Her mother squeezed her hand with what little strength she had left. "You're the strongest person I know, Rosa. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But don't sacrifice yourself for us if you don't have to." The problem was, Rosa felt like she did have to. 3 days later, she called the number on Richard's business card and said yes. The wedding happened quickly and quietly. Just Richard's lawyer and Rosa's family at the courthouse. Her brothers looked confused and worried. Her mother cried, though she tried to hide it. Rosa wore a simple white dress that Richard had bought for her. It cost more than everything in her closet combined, but it felt like a costume, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Richard gently kissed her forehead. Not her lips, just her forehead, like a grandfather would. Rosa felt numb, like she was watching everything happen to someone else. Richard's mansion was like something from a magazine. Rosa had cleaned houses before, but never anything like this. The entryway alone was bigger than her family's entire apartment. Marble floors stretched in every direction. A massive staircase curved up to the second floor. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings. Rosa felt tiny and out of place. A housekeeper named Helen showed her around. There was a library with thousands of books, a dining room with a table that could seat 20 people, a kitchen with appliances Rosa didn't even know existed, and the bedroom. Oh, the bedroom. It was enormous, with a bed so big it could fit 5 people. The bathroom had a tub the size of a small swimming pool. "Mr. Westbrook's room is in the east wing," Helen explained. "He wanted you to have the master suite. He thought you'd be more comfortable with your own space." True to his word, Richard had arranged everything. Rosa's mother was moved to a private hospital the very next day. Real doctors, specialists, started running tests immediately. Her brothers were enrolled in a better school, with new clothes and supplies. All the debts, the crushing weight that had been suffocating Rosa for 3 years, vanished overnight. Just like that, gone. Rosa should have felt relieved, happy even. Instead, she felt hollow. The first few days in the mansion were the loneliest of her life. Richard was kind but distant. He spent most of his time in his study making business calls or reading. They ate breakfast together in that enormous dining room, sitting at opposite ends of the long table. The conversations were polite and awkward. "How did you sleep?" "Fine, how's the food?" "Very good." "Is there anything you need?" "Oh, thank you." Rosa had a credit card with no limit. She could buy anything she wanted. Clothes, jewelry, electronics, anything, but what was the point? She had no friends to show these things to. No life outside these walls. Richard insisted she have a security guard accompany her anywhere she went. For her safety, he said. But it felt like a prison guard. Helen and the other staff were polite but distant. Rosa heard them whispering sometimes. She knew what they were saying. Gold digger. Trophy wife. A young girl who married an old man for his money. They didn't understand that she felt just as trapped as they thought Richard was being used. Every evening, Rosa wandered the empty hallways of the mansion. Room after room of beautiful, expensive things, and not a single one of them made her feel at home. She found herself in the library most nights, running her fingers along the spines of books she was too tired to read. She'd traded one kind of exhaustion for another. Before, she was exhausted from working. Now she was exhausted from the weight of this strange new life. At night, alone in that massive bed, Rosa cried. She cried for the life she'd left behind, even though that life had been so hard. At least it had been real. At least she'd felt like herself. Now she felt like a doll in a dollhouse, expensive and pretty and completely lifeless. Richard kept his distance, perhaps sensing her unhappiness. Sometimes Rosa would catch him watching her with sad eyes, but he never said anything. They were two lonely people living in the same house, but they might as well have been on different planets. A week passed like this. 7 days of luxury and misery. 7 days of having everything and feeling like she had nothing. Then, on the 7th night, unable to sleep, Rosa decided to explore the parts of the mansion she hadn't seen yet. Richard had mentioned casually that the West Wing was mostly storage and old family things, nothing interesting. But Rosa was drawn to it anyway. Maybe because it was the one place she hadn't been allowed to see. She walked down the dimly lit hallway, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. At the end of the hall, she saw a door with light seeping out from underneath. Her heart started racing. Richard should have been asleep hours ago. What was he doing up at 2 in the morning? The door was slightly open. Rosa knew she shouldn't look, knew she should turn around and go back to bed, but something made her push the door open wider. What she saw inside that room made her gasp out loud, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with photographs. But not just any photographs. They were pictures of her. Rosa's hands trembled as she stepped into the room. The photographs covered every inch of the walls. Pictures of her as a little girl, gap-toothed and smiling in her school uniform. Pictures of her as a teenager, awkward and shy. Recent pictures of her serving coffee at the cafe, walking down the street, standing outside her old apartment building. There had to be hundreds of them. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. This was insane. This was beyond creepy. What kind of person did this? She felt violated, scared, and confused all at once. She wanted to run, to scream, but her feet seemed frozen to the floor. Then she saw the newspaper clippings, articles about her father's death yellowed with age, medical reports about her mother's illness. Even her old report cards from elementary school were pinned to a corkboard. Someone had been collecting information about her life for years, not just months, years. Rosa's eyes landed on a desk in the corner covered with folders and documents. With shaking hands, she opened the top folder. The label read Project Guardian Angel in neat handwriting. Inside were financial documents, bank statements, and what looked like investigation reports. She started reading, and with each page her confusion grew deeper. There were records of anonymous donations made to her mother's hospital over the past 5 years. Someone had been paying portions of their medical bills without them knowing. Records of scholarship applications Rosa had submitted to colleges, applications she thought had been rejected. But according to these documents, they'd been accepted with full funding. The letters had just never reached her. Instead, the money had been quietly redirected to pay for her family's immediate needs. Rosa found job listings she recognized. That position at the cafe that had opened up exactly when she needed it most. The charity event company that had hired her despite her having no experience. None of it had been coincidence. It had all been arranged. Her hands found a leather journal, worn and clearly well used. She opened it with trembling fingers and began to read Richard's handwriting. June 10th, 5 years ago. Today I met Antonio Rodriguez. He came to my office requesting a business loan for his small construction company. Most banks had turned him down, but there was something about his dignity, his determination that reminded me of myself at that age. I approved the loan. His daughter Rosa came with him. She must have been 19, helping her father with the paperwork. Bright, hard-working, asking smart questions. She reminded me so much of my own daughter. Rosa's vision blurred with tears. She kept reading. July 3rd. Antonio Rodriguez died today in a workplace accident. The family he left behind is struggling. I've looked into the case. The construction company is claiming it was his fault, but I know that's a lie. I've seen this before. Big companies protecting themselves while families suffer. I wanted to help them fight, but Antonio's widow refused charity. Too proud. I understand that pride. I was once poor too. The entries continued, page after page, documenting how Richard had watched her family struggle from afar. How he'd tried to help in secret ways, always careful not to be discovered. Anonymous payments. Mysterious opportunities that appeared at just the right time. All of it had been him. November 15th, 3 years ago. Rosa dropped out of college today. I saw the withdrawal papers. She was studying to be a teacher. She would have been wonderful at it. But her mother got sick and someone had to take care of the family. My heart breaks watching this brilliant young woman sacrifice everything. It reminds me too much of when I lost my own daughter. Rosa found a photograph tucked between the pages. A beautiful young woman around her age, standing next to a younger version of Richard. The resemblance between Rosa and the girl in the photo was striking. Same dark hair, same bright eyes, same warm smile. She turned to the next page and read words that made her sink to her knees. My daughter Isabella died 15 years ago. She was 24, Rosa's exact age when I started watching this family. A drunk driver hit her car on her way home from her teaching job. She died instantly. My wife never recovered from the grief. She died 2 years ago, and I think part of her died the day we lost Isabella. Rosa pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Watching Rosa is like watching my daughter get a second chance at life. The same determination, the same kindness, the same quiet strength. I couldn't save Isabella. I couldn't protect my own child from the cruelty of this world. But maybe, just maybe, I can help this young woman who reminds me so much of what I lost. The journal entries grew more recent. Richard wrote about his wife's death, about the loneliness that consumed him, about how watching Rosa struggle gave him purpose but also made him feel helpless. He wrote about the moral dilemma of helping without permission, of being a silent guardian to someone who didn't know he existed. Then came the entry that made Rosa's heart stop. I've made a terrible decision. I've convinced myself that marrying Rosa is helping her, but I know the truth. I'm a selfish old man trying to fill the void my daughter left behind. I'm using my money to buy companionship because I'm too afraid to die alone. Rosa deserves so much better than this. She deserves to fall in love with someone her own age, to have a real life, real happiness. What have I done? The journal entries after the wedding were painful to read. Richard wrote about seeing the sadness in Rosa's eyes, about hearing her cry at night through the walls, about hating himself for putting her in this situation. The most recent entry was from yesterday. I can't do this anymore. I've become the villain in Rosa's story, not her guardian angel. Tomorrow I'm going to give her the divorce papers and the trust fund. She needs to be free. I'd rather die alone knowing I did the right thing than live with the guilt of keeping her trapped in this beautiful prison. Rosa sat on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of Richard's 5-year obsession with her family, but it wasn't the obsession of a creepy stalker. It was the desperate action of a broken man trying to save someone else because he couldn't save his own daughter. It was wrong and sad and complicated and heartbreaking all at once. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Richard appeared in the doorway, his face going pale when he saw her sitting there with his journal in her hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening. Rosa, Richard's voice cracked. He looked old and frail in a way she'd never seen before. I can explain. You've been watching my family for 5 years. Rosa's voice was shaky but not angry. Just stunned. All those coincidences, all those lucky breaks. It was you. All of it was you. Richard slumped against the doorframe, looking like he might collapse. Yes, your daughter. I look like your daughter. You remind me of her. Tears ran down Richard's wrinkled cheeks. Not just how you look, but who you are. The same brave, selfless, beautiful soul. When I lost Isabella, I lost everything. And then I found your family. And I saw you struggling the way she used to struggle to make the world better. I couldn't save my own child, but I thought maybe I could help you. Rosa stood up slowly, still clutching the journal. So the marriage. You married me because I remind you of your dead daughter? Richard flinched at her words. When you put it that way, it sounds sick and twisted. Maybe it is. I told myself I was helping you, that it was mutually beneficial. But the truth is I was being selfish. I was so lonely after my wife died, and you made me feel like I still had family, like I still had purpose. He pulled an envelope from his pocket with shaking hands. These are divorce papers, already signed, and papers for a trust fund in your name. $5 million. No conditions, no strings. You're free to leave right now, and your family will still be taken care of. I'm so sorry, Rosa. I should never have put you in this position. Rosa looked at the envelope, then at the broken old man standing before her. Then she looked at the walls covered with photos, at the journal full of painful confessions, at the evidence of 5 years of secret kindness from someone who had been hurting just as much as her family had been. Her mind raced with emotions she couldn't even name. Anger, confusion, sadness, and something else. Something unexpected. Understanding, maybe. Or compassion. She thought about the past week, about how miserable she'd been, but also about how miserable Richard had looked. 2 lonely people trapped in their own grief, unable to reach each other. Rosa made a decision in that moment that surprised even herself. A decision that would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Rosa set the envelope down on the desk without opening it. Richard stared at her in confusion, his hand still extended, offering her freedom and $5 million. Any reasonable person would have grabbed that envelope and run as fast as they could. But Rosa didn't move toward the door. Instead, she took a step closer to Richard. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. Richard looked like he'd been slapped. What, Rosa, you don't understand. You're free to go. You don't owe me anything. I've been manipulating your life for 5 years. I'm a creepy old man who married you because you remind me of my dead daughter. You should be running away screaming. Maybe I should be. Rosa wiped tears from her face. This whole thing is crazy and wrong and messed up. You invaded my privacy. You watched my family without permission. You married me for selfish reasons. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But you also saved us. When my father died and everyone else turned their backs on us, you were there. When we were about to lose everything, you helped us without asking for anything in return. For 5 years. That doesn't make it right, Richard said, his voice breaking. I should have just helped openly instead of hiding in the shadows like some kind of stalker. Why didn't you? Rosa asked. Why all the secrecy? Richard sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit his 73 years. Because your mother would have refused. I saw it when I offered to help with the lawsuit after your father died. She has pride, dignity. She didn't want charity from a stranger, so I had to help in ways she wouldn't notice, ways she couldn't refuse because she didn't know it was happening. Rosa thought about her mother and realized Richard was right. Her mother would have refused help from a wealthy stranger. She would have rather struggled than accept what she saw as pity. And the marriage? Rosa asked softly. Why ask me to marry you? Richard covered his face with his hands. Because I'm a foolish old man who was so lonely I couldn't think straight. After my wife died, this house became a tomb. Every room reminded me of what I'd lost. Isabella's room is exactly as she left it 15 years ago. My wife's clothes are still in her closet. I couldn't let go of anything because letting go felt like losing them all over again. He looked up at Rosa with red, swollen eyes. Then I saw you at that charity event helping that woman who fell. Everyone else just walked around her, but you stopped to help. Just like Isabella would have done. Just like she always did. And I thought maybe if I could have you in my life in this house, maybe it wouldn't feel so empty anymore. Maybe I could pretend I still had family. That's really messed up, Richard, Rosa said, but her voice wasn't harsh. It was sad, sympathetic, I know. I know it is. That's why you need to take these papers and leave. Start over. Live your life the way you deserve to live it. Rosa pulled up another chair and sat down across from him. Can I ask you something? This past week, when you saw how miserable I was, why didn't you just tell me the truth then? Because I was a coward. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd hate me. And I was right, wasn't I? You must hate me now. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything she'd learned tonight. I don't hate you. I should, but I don't. You know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who's been in pain for 15 years. Someone who lost everything that mattered and has been trying to fill that hole ever since. I see someone who helped my family when no one else would. Yes, you went about it in a weird way. Yes, the marriage thing was wrong. But I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a hurting person who made bad choices because you were desperate. Richard shook his head in disbelief. How can you be so understanding? Most people would call the police, or at least take the money and run. Maybe I'm stupid, Rosa said with a small, sad smile. Or maybe I understand what it's like to be desperate. I married you, didn't I? I sold myself for money to save my family. We both made desperate choices. We both ended up trapped in this house, miserable and lonely. So what are you saying? Richard asked carefully. Rosa stood up and walked to the wall of photographs. She touched one of herself as a little girl sitting on her father's shoulders. You took these photos or hired someone to take them? I hired investigators. I'm sorry. I know how invasive that is. It is invasive. It's really creepy, actually. She turned to face him. But you know what else it is? It's 5 years of caring. 5 years of watching out for someone else when you had no reason to. You didn't know me. I wasn't your family. You owed us nothing, but you helped anyway. I did it for selfish reasons. Maybe at first. But Richard, you kept helping even when we didn't know. Even when you got nothing back except the satisfaction of knowing you'd done something good. That counts for something. Richard stood up slowly, his knees creaking. What exactly are you proposing, Rosa? I'm proposing we start over, but the right way this time. Rosa crossed her arms, thinking carefully about her words. No more living in separate wings of the house like strangers. No more polite, awkward conversations over breakfast. No more pretending this is a normal marriage when it's not. Instead, we be honest. We be real. I don't understand. You married me because you needed family, right? Someone to fill the emptiness. Well, guess what? I need that too. I need family. I lost my father. My mother is sick. My brothers are practically kids. I've been carrying everything alone for 3 years and I'm exhausted. So maybe we can help each other, not as husband and wife in the romantic sense, but as family. Real family. Richard looked stunned. You want to stay? Knowing everything you know now? I want to try something different. I want us to actually get to know each other. Have real conversations, share meals together without sitting at opposite ends of a football field-sized table. Maybe watch a movie together or play cards or I don't know, normal family stuff. You can tell me about Isabella and your wife. I can tell you about my father and what it was like growing up. We stop being strangers living in the same house and start being actual people who care about each other. But you're so young. You should be out living your life, not keeping an old man company. Rosa sat back down and looked Richard directly in the eyes. Let me ask you something. This past week, were you happy? Even a little bit? Richard shook his head. No, I felt guilty every time I saw your sad face. I heard you crying at night. It was torture. Exactly. We were both miserable. But you know those mornings when we had breakfast together and actually talked for a few minutes? Those weren't terrible. When you asked about my brothers and seemed genuinely interested, that was nice. When you told me about the book you were reading, I liked hearing about it. Those small moments were good. We just need more of them. Rosa, you're being incredibly kind, but you don't have to do this. You can take the money and go build a life. Find someone your own age to fall in love with. Have a real marriage, children, all of it. Who says I can't do those things eventually? Maybe this doesn't have to be forever. Maybe it's just for now. For however long we both need it. Rosa reached over and took Richard's wrinkled hand in hers. You've spent 5 years watching over my family like a guardian angel. Let me return the favor. Let me help you heal from losing Isabella. Let me be the family you need right now. Tears spilled down Richard's cheeks again. I don't deserve your kindness. Maybe not. But I'm giving it anyway. Rosa squeezed his hand. Here's my condition, though. No more secrets. No more watching me from a distance. No more separate lives. If we're going to be family, we do it right. We do it honestly. Richard was quiet for a long moment, clearly overwhelmed. Finally, he spoke in a whisper. What do we do now? Rosa smiled, and for the first time since the wedding, it was a genuine smile. Now we start over. Hi, my name is Rosa Rodriguez. I'm 24 years old. I love reading, I wanted to be a teacher, and I take my coffee with way too much sugar. Tell me about yourself. Richard let out a surprised laugh through his tears. It was a rusty sound like he hadn't laughed in years. My name is Richard Westbrook. I'm 73 years old. I started my business with nothing but $50 and a dream 40 years ago. I love old mystery novels and terrible action movies, and I've forgotten what it feels like to have family, but I'd like to remember. They sat there in that strange room full of photographs, two broken people deciding to try something crazy. Not a romantic relationship, not a business arrangement, but something else entirely. Something neither of them had words for yet. A chance to heal together instead of hurting alone. The next morning would be different. Everything would be different. And for the first time since arriving at the mansion, Rosa felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe this strange situation could become something good after all. The morning after their conversation in the photograph room, Rosa came down to breakfast to find something different. Richard wasn't sitting at the far end of the long dining table. Instead, he'd set up breakfast in the small kitchen nook, 2 chairs facing each other across a normal-sized table. Coffee was brewing and he was attempting to make pancakes. Badly. I haven't cooked in 20 years, Richard admitted, looking embarrassed as smoke rose from the pan. I thought maybe we could eat like normal people instead of shouting at each other across that ridiculous table. Rosa laughed, actually laughed, and took over the pancake making. You're burning them. Here, let me show you. They ate together in that cozy kitchen nook, and for the first time the conversation felt real. Richard told her about his childhood growing up poor, about working 3 jobs just like she had, about building his company from nothing. Rosa told him about her father's terrible jokes, about her brother's constant fighting, about the dreams she'd had before life got complicated. I still have your college transcripts in that creepy room, Richard said, wincing at his own words. You had a 4.0 average. You were brilliant. Were. Past tense. Rosa sipped her coffee sadly. Why past tense? Why not go back? I'm 24. I'd be starting over. And besides, who has time for school? Richard set down his fork. Rosa, part of this new arrangement, this family thing we're trying, means I get to look out for you too. Not from the shadows anymore, but openly. If you want to go back to school, go back. I'll handle everything else. That's not fair to you. Family isn't about fair. It's about helping each other. You're helping me by being here, by giving me a reason to get up in the morning again. Let me help you chase your dreams. It was the first of many such conversations. Over the following weeks, the mansion that had felt like a beautiful prison started to feel different. Richard moved his office to a room near the library so they could work in the same space. Rosa would study while Richard handled business calls, and during breaks they'd talk. Really talk. Richard told her about Isabella, showing her photo albums and videos. He cried while describing her first day of school, her college graduation, the teaching award she'd won just months before the accident. Rosa held his hand and listened, letting him grieve openly for the first time in years. My wife couldn't talk about her after she died, Richard explained. It hurt too much, so we just stopped. We put away the photos, closed the door to her room, and pretended we could move on by forgetting. But you can't heal a wound by ignoring it. Rosa shared her own grief about her father. I never got to say goodbye. He left for work that morning, kissed my forehead, told me he was proud of me. Then he was just gone. I had to be strong for everyone else, so I never really let myself fall apart. I just kept moving, kept working, kept surviving. You don't have to just survive anymore, Richard said gently. You're allowed to actually live. Rosa enrolled in online classes to finish her degree. Richard was her biggest cheerleader, asking about her assignments, proofreading her papers, celebrating her good grades like a proud father. He even attended her video lectures sometimes, sitting in the corner with his own reading, just to keep her company. In return, Rosa brought life back into the mansion. She invited her brothers over on weekends, and their energy and chaos made Richard laugh in ways he hadn't laughed in decades. Her mother, improving rapidly with proper medical care, visited often. She'd been suspicious of the arrangement at first, but watching Richard and Rosa interact, she saw something genuine forming. He's good for you, her mother said one afternoon while they baked cookies together. Not in a romantic way, but in a family way. He needs you as much as you needed him. I know, Mama, it's strange, but it works. Rosa also insisted on changes to the house. The formal dining room became a game room where she taught Richard to play video games. He was terrible at them, but his competitive spirit made him keep trying, much to Rosa's amusement. The stuffy sitting room became a cozy movie theater, where they watched Richard's beloved action films and Rosa's favorite comedies. One evening, 6 months after that night in the photograph room, Rosa found Richard standing outside Isabella's bedroom. He'd kept it locked and untouched for 15 years, a shrine to his grief. I think it's time, Richard said quietly. Time to let her go. Not forget her, but let go of the pain. Together, they opened the room. Rosa helped Richard sort through Isabella's belongings, keeping the meaningful items and donating things that could help others. They created a beautiful memorial corner in the library with Isabella's favorite books, her teaching award, and photos of her smiling face. It honored her memory without trying to freeze time. She would have liked you, Richard said, touching Isabella's photo gently. You're both teachers at heart. Both helpers, both lights in the darkness. I wish I could have met her. In a way, helping me heal is like giving her a gift. She'd want me to be happy. She'd want me to have family again. The breakthrough moment came on Rosa's 25th birthday. Richard threw her a real party, inviting her friends from college, her family, even people from her old jobs. The mansion that had been silent and dead for years was filled with music, laughter, and life. During the party, Richard pulled Rosa aside and handed her an envelope. This isn't about obligation or payment. This is because I want to. Inside was a deed. Richard had purchased a small school building that had been abandoned for years. For when you graduate, your own school, you can teach underprivileged kids like we both were, make a difference the way you always wanted to. Rosa burst into tears, hugging Richard tightly. This is too much. It's not nearly enough for what you've given me. Richard hugged her back, and for the first time it didn't feel awkward or forced. It felt like a real father-daughter embrace. You gave me back my life, Rosa. You showed me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to show up for each other. At the party, someone asked them about their unusual arrangement. So what are you two exactly? Husband and wife? Friends, what? Rosa and Richard looked at each other and smiled. We're family, they said in unison. A year after the wedding, Rosa graduated with her teaching degree. Richard sat in the audience, tears streaming down his face as she walked across the stage. Her mother and brothers cheered wildly. It felt like a real family celebration. That evening, back at the mansion that now felt like home, Rosa found Richard in the library looking at photos. Not the creepy surveillance photos from before, but normal family photos they'd taken over the past year. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, casual moments of laughter. "You know what's funny?" Richard said. "I spent 5 years watching your life from a distance thinking I was helping. But I was just a lonely old man pretending to be important. This past year, actually being part of your life, actually being family, that's what really mattered. That's what saved both of us." Rosa sat beside him. "I've been thinking about something. That divorce paperwork is still sitting in a drawer somewhere, unsigned by me. Maybe we should make this official, not as a romantic marriage, but as a legal family. You could officially adopt me as your daughter. Make it real on paper, not just in our hearts." Richard's eyes widened. "You'd want that? Even knowing everything? Even knowing how we started? Especially knowing everything. We both made mistakes. We both had selfish reasons. But we chose to do something good with a bad situation. We chose each other. That's what family is, isn't it? Choosing to show up, choosing to stay, choosing to love each other despite the messy, complicated reality." Richard pulled her into another hug, and this time, neither of them held back tears. "My daughter died 15 years ago.
I thought that hole in my heart would never heal."
But you didn't fill that hole, Rosa. You helped me realize I could grow around it. Isabella will always be my daughter, but there's room in my heart for you too. Not as a replacement, but as a gift, a second chance at being a father. And you're the father figure I needed after losing mine. We found each other at the right time, even if it happened in the weirdest way possible." They spent the rest of that evening planning Rosa's school, which would open in 6 months. They'd call it Isabella's Learning Center, honoring Richard's daughter by helping other children the way Isabella had always wanted to help. Rosa would teach there, and Richard would handle the business side. 2 years after that strange wedding on Rosa's 26th birthday, the legal adoption was finalized. The judge who processed the paperwork remarked that she'd never seen an adoption quite like this one, but that love was love regardless of how it came to be. As they left the courthouse, officially father and daughter, Rosa squeezed Richard's hand. "You know, you really were my guardian angel. You just needed to learn how to be one up close instead of from far away." Richard smiled, looking healthier and happier than he had in 15 years. "And you taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding new reasons to live while honoring what we've lost." They drove home together, to the mansion that was no longer empty, no longer a prison, but a real home filled with real family. The story that started with desperation, secrets, and loneliness had transformed into something beautiful. Two broken people had found each other, and in choosing to be honest, in choosing to be vulnerable, in choosing to show up for each other every day, they'd created the family they both desperately needed. Sometimes the most unexpected arrangements turn into the most genuine relationships, and sometimes the people who save us are the ones we choose to save in return.